For 20 years, every dollar I saved went to paying off my house. I thought I was building a secure future for myself. I never knew I was the victim of a long and cruel con. And the man cashing my checks was my own son. This is the story of how I found out the horrifying truth. This story of betrayal is almost too shocking to be true. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed and have the notification bell on, because you will need to see how this ends. For 20 years, the first Thursday of every month was a day of quiet ceremony for me. I'd sit at my small oak desk, the one I bought at a flea market after my husband Robert passed away, and I would perform the ritual that defined my independence. I'd open my ledger, note the date, and then write out the check. North Star Mortgage Services, the name read. A check for $1,254 every month, without fail, for 240 months. That check was more than just a payment. It was a testament. It was the proof that I, Eleanor Vance, a widow at 48, could stand on my own 2 feet. This little blue house, with its slightly crooked porch and the rose bushes Robert planted, was mine. I was earning it, inch by painful inch. My son, Daniel, always admired what he called my fiscal discipline. He was a businessman, sharp and successful, living 3 states away in a world of glass-walled offices and important meetings. When he'd visit for the holidays, he'd look over my finances with a professional eye. "You're doing great, Mom," he'd say, tapping my payment ledger. "Impressive. Most people your age aren't this on top of things." His approval felt like a warm blanket. He was proud of me. He understood the importance of what I was doing. He even helped me set up the online payment portal a few years back to make things easier and more secure. His help, I thought, was just another blessing. The day my world cracked open started with the mail. It wasn't a bill or a letter, but a thick, official-looking envelope from the county tax assessor's office. Just the annual property value assessment, I assumed. I slid it open with my letter opener, the one shaped like a silver feather that Daniel had given me for Christmas one year. I scanned the document, my eyes skimming over the usual jargon: assessed value, tax rate, lot dimensions. Everything looked normal. And then I saw it. A small section near the bottom labeled Mortgagee of Record. My brow furrowed. The name listed wasn't North Star Mortgage Services. It was a name I'd never seen before. DP Holdings, LLC. My first reaction wasn't alarm, but annoyance. A typo. A bureaucratic mix-up. After 20 years of flawless payments, some clerk in a dusty county office had probably hit the wrong key. I let out an exasperated sigh. Now I'd have to spend all morning on the phone navigating automated menus and indifferent government employees to get it fixed. I decided to do a little research first, so I'd have all my facts straight when I called. It was a simple task. All registered businesses in the state were listed on the Secretary of State's official website. I sat down at my desk, the same desk where I performed my monthly ritual, and typed DP Holdings, LLC into the search bar. I clicked the search button, expecting to see some generic corporate filing, perhaps for a large out-of-state bank that had bought my mortgage from North Star. The page loaded. DP Holdings, LLC, a domestic limited liability company. Date of formation, May 12, 2005. 20 years ago, almost to the day. Status, active and in good standing. And then the final line, the line that took the air from my lungs and turned the solid floor beneath my feet into shifting sand. Registered agent or principal owner, Daniel R. Peterson. Daniel, my Daniel. DP Holdings? Daniel Peterson? The letters swam before my eyes. It had to be a mistake, a coincidence. There must be thousands of Daniel Petersons in the world. But the formation date? 20 years ago? The same year I bought this house and started making payments to a company I'd never met? a company's name that had been provided to me by the helpful real estate agent who, I now remembered with a sickening lurch, had been a personal recommendation from my son. My hands trembling, I did another search. North Star Mortgage Services? No website, no phone number, no record of its existence anywhere. It was a ghost, a phantom name on a check I had written 240 times. I leaned back in my chair, the room spinning. The pieces of the last 20 years of my life began to rearrange themselves in my mind, reforming from a story of pride and independence into a monstrous tapestry of lies. I hadn't been paying for my house. I had been paying for my son's enrichment. I wasn't a homeowner. I was a tenant in my own life, and my landlord was the boy I had raised. The silver feather letter opener on my desk suddenly felt like a dagger in my heart. I stared at the name on the screen, my son's name, and 20 years of my life shattered into a million pieces. The lie was exposed, but what I did next, no one, especially not my son, ever saw coming.
The first hour after the discovery was a blur. A thick, gray fog of disbelief enveloped me, muffling the world. I remember getting up from my desk and walking through my house, my hand trailing along the floral wallpaper of the hallway. Every object I looked at seemed to mock me. The sturdy banister I'd held onto for support, the sunny spot on the rug where I'd read stories to Daniel when he was a boy. The very air I was breathing, it all felt like part of a massive, elaborate stage set for a play in which I was the unwitting fool. For 20 years, this house had been my anchor, my symbol of strength. In a single, heart-stopping moment, it had transformed into a cage built of my own son's lies. My mind, a frantic librarian, began pulling old files from dusty shelves, recataloguing every memory under a new, horrifying heading, The Great Deception. I remembered the closing 20 years ago, the real estate agent, so friendly and helpful, a man Daniel had recommended from his own network. The closing lawyer who rushed me through a mountain of paperwork, his pen pointing, sign here, sign here, sign here. I had trusted them. I had trusted my son. The North Star Mortgage Services name was just one of many on a pile of documents I barely understood. I was a grieving widow trying to secure a future, and my son, my own flesh and blood, had used my vulnerability as a weapon against me. The fog of shock slowly began to burn away, replaced by the cold, clean fire of rage. It wasn't a hot, screaming anger. It was a glacial fury that settled deep in my bones. I had been a victim for 2 decades. I would not be a victim for one more day. He had underestimated me. He saw me as a simple, trusting old woman who would pay her bills and never ask questions. He was right about the first part. He was about to find out how wrong he was about the second. Confronting him was useless. He would lie. He would twist the story, gaslight me, and maybe even try to make me believe I was mistaken or senile. No, I needed proof. Hard, irrefutable evidence. A paper trail that would stretch back 20 years and wrap around his neck like a noose. My first stop was the bank. The next morning, I dressed carefully, not in my usual comfortable sweaters, but in a smart blazer and trousers I saved for important appointments. I needed to look sharp, competent, and in control. I walked into the downtown branch of my local bank, the same one I'd used for 40 years, and asked to speak with the branch manager, Mr. Harris. I had my story ready. I sat opposite him in his glass-walled office and gave him a warm, confident smile. "Good morning, David," I began. "I'm undertaking a full personal financial audit for my retirement planning, and my accountant needs a complete history of my largest single monthly expenditure over the past 2 decades. That would be my mortgage payments." He nodded, understanding. "Of course, Eleanor, a wise step. You need copies of the checks themselves?" "That would be perfect," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "All 240 of them if possible, to a company called North Star Mortgage Services." I said the name out loud for the first time without flinching. Mr. Harris typed into his computer, his brow furrowed. "That's a significant records request, Eleanor. It will take some time to pull the archives, especially for the older paper checks before you switch to online payments." "I understand," I said. "There's no rush. I just need a complete and unbroken record. It's very important for the audit." "I'll get the process started right away," he said, giving me a reassuring smile. "We should have the full file compiled for you in 3 to 5 business days. We'll give you a call the moment it's ready." I thanked him, my composure holding firm until I was back in the safety of my own car. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. 3 to 5 days. In 3 to 5 days, I would hold it in my hands. 20 years of canceled checks. 20 years of my hard-earned money. 20 years of his crime, all documented in the neat, undeniable script of the United States banking system. The engine of my revenge had just been started. He thought his crimes were buried under 20 years of paper and my naive trust. He didn't know I was about to dig up every single receipt and that each one would be a nail in the coffin he was building for himself.
Those 5 days of waiting were a masterclass in psychological torture. I lived my life on the surface, a perfect automaton of my former self. I watered the plants, I watched my evening news programs, I spoke to my neighbors over the fence about the weather. But underneath, a revolution was taking place. My memories, once my most treasured possessions, had become a minefield. I'd pick up a framed photo of Daniel's college graduation, his arm slung around my shoulder, and instead of pride, I'd feel a cold dread. The smile on his face, once a source of joy, now looked like the triumphant smirk of a master manipulator. How long had he been planning this? Did the idea take root before or after his father died? The questions were relentless, a swarm of angry hornets in my mind. The house itself felt different, tainted. The walls I had so lovingly painted, the floors I had scrubbed on my hands and knees, every inch of it felt like a monument to my own foolishness. I had been living in a beautifully maintained crime scene for 20 decades, and the lead detective, me, had only just arrived. Daniel called on Tuesday, his usual weekly check-in. The cheerfulness in his voice was like acid in my ear. "Hey, Mom, just calling to see how you're doing. Everything okay?" "Everything is just fine, dear," I said, my voice a carefully crafted instrument of maternal warmth. The lie tasted like rust in my mouth. My heart was a block of ice, but I made my voice sound like a summer afternoon. "Great. Listen, I was just going over some of my own accounts, and it got me thinking. Are you doing okay financially? Is the mortgage payment getting to be too much?" I almost choked. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of his question stole the air from my lungs. For a split second, I wanted to scream, to unleash the rage and pain that was churning inside me. But I swallowed it down, turning the poison into fuel. I had to play the part. My performance had to be flawless. "Oh, that's so sweet of you to ask, honey," I said, my voice cooing. "But I'm managing just fine. Always have. You know me, disciplined as they come." "I know, Mom, you're amazing," he said, his voice slick with fake admiration. "Well, just wanted to check in. Love you." "I love you too." And I hung up the phone, my hand shaking with the effort of it all. The conversation left me feeling hollowed out and strangely powerful. He had no idea. He was still playing his part in a 20-year-old play, utterly oblivious to the fact that the lead actress had thrown away the script and was now directing a whole new show. That evening, driven by a restless energy, I went to the attic. I was looking for my old tax files, but I found something else, a dusty accordion file labeled House, Closing 2005. I pulled it down, and for the first time in 20 years, I opened it. I methodically went through the brittle, yellowed papers, and there it was, on the settlement statement. The name of the real estate agent, Richard Brody. The man Daniel had recommended, his friend from college. On a whim, I typed his name into my laptop search engine. The first few results were old business listings, but the fourth result was a link to a news article from a major city paper dated 6 years ago. The headline read, "Local realtor loses license, faces multiple fraud charges in elder financial abuse scheme." My blood ran cold. I clicked the link. The article detailed how Richard Brody had colluded with the children of several elderly clients to fraudulently transfer property deeds and set up shell corporations to siphon off their assets. It was my story. It was my life, written in cold, black and white print with someone else's name in place of mine. This wasn't just my son being greedy. This was a calculated, professional criminal enterprise. He had an accomplice. He had a blueprint. The next morning, the phone called. It was Mr. Harris from the bank. "Good morning, Eleanor," he said. "Just wanted to let you know your file is ready. It's quite a stack. You can come by and pick it up at your convenience." "Thank you, David," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I'm on my way." I hung up the phone. The wait was over. The hunt was on. I had the name of his accomplice, and now I was on my way to pick up 240 pieces of evidence, one for every month of his betrayal. The bank had the paper trail. I had uncovered his partner in crime. My son thought he was just a loving child calling his mother. He had no idea he was a suspect talking to the lead investigator of his own downfall.
The box Mr. Harris placed on the counter in front of me was heavier than I expected. It was a standard cardboard banker's box, but it felt like it was filled with lead. In a way, it was. It was weighted down with 20 years of my life, my labor, my sacrifice. "Here you are, Eleanor," Mr. Harris said, with a cheerful smile. 240 monthly payments, all accounted for. I have to say, I'm impressed. You've never missed a single one. His words, meant as a compliment, felt like a slap in the face. I gave him a tight, thin smile, signed the release form, and hauled the box out to my car. Back home, I didn't open it right away. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my dining room table. The same table where Daniel had, over many holiday dinners, told me how proud he was of my financial independence. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. Finally, with a deep, steadying breath, I slit the tape on the box with my silver feather letter opener, his gift, and began to unpack the contents. My dining room transformed into a war room. I spent the next 2 days in a meticulous, painstaking reconstruction of my own deception. I laid out the records chronologically, creating a timeline that stretched from the spring of 2005 to the present day. The early years were copies of my own checks, written in my neat, careful cursive, to North Star Mortgage Services. Then came the switch to online payments, documented by crisp bank statements. Every month, like clockwork, $1,254. A river of money flowing out of my account and into a phantom company. The bank had also provided records for the receiving account, as they were the facilitators of the transfer. I saw the deposits, matching my payments to the penny, going into an account for DP Holdings, LLC. And then I saw the withdrawals. This was the part that truly broke me. In 2008, a withdrawal of $30,000. I remembered that year. Daniel had bought his first starter home with his new wife. He'd told me he'd gotten a great bonus at work. In reality, I had bought his house, while I was still struggling to pay for my own. In 2012, a withdrawal of $50,000. I remembered that too. That was the year he launched his first successful tech startup. He'd boasted about his savvy investors. I was his savvy investor. I was the silent, unwitting partner in his entire life. His lavish vacations, his designer clothes, the private school his children attended, I saw it all, laid out in a series of debits from the account my life savings had funded. He hadn't just stolen my money. He had stolen my life and used it to build his own, then had the audacity to present it to me as a symbol of his success. The rage was a physical thing now,
a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I was no longer a grieving mother. I was a creditor, and my son was 20 years in default. The smoking gun came from a file dated 7 years ago. A junior bank employee had apparently made a mistake. Stapled to one of my monthly statements was a copy of an internal change of address form for DP Holdings, LLC. The previous address was a P.O. box. The new address, the one they were to send all official correspondence to, was listed clear as day. It was Daniel's home address, his beautiful 5-bedroom house in the wealthy suburbs, the house I had paid for. There it was, the undeniable legal link, the nail for the coffin. I carefully placed all my findings into a new, clean folder. I had the timeline, the canceled checks, the deposit records, the withdrawal history that matched his life's milestones, and now the official document linking him directly to the shell company. The case was complete. Confronting him myself was off the table. This was no longer a family matter to be solved with tears and recriminations. This was a federal crime. Mail fraud, wire fraud, financial elder abuse. The list was long and ugly. This required a professional. I spent that evening not looking at old photos, but at the websites of the top law firms in the state. I wasn't looking for a family lawyer. I was looking for a shark, a killer, someone who specialized in complex financial fraud and who would see my case not as a tragedy, but as a challenge. I found her. A woman named Jessica Riley, a former federal prosecutor with a reputation for being brilliant, relentless, and utterly merciless in the courtroom. Her face on the website was sharp, intelligent, and exuded a confidence that I found deeply comforting. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for her office. When her assistant answered, my voice was as calm and steady as a surgeon's. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to schedule a consultation with Miss Riley regarding a multi-million-dollar, 20-year-long case of financial fraud. We are on the verge of the climax. What happens now will turn everything upside down. You simply cannot miss the resolution of this story." The law office of Jessica Riley was on the 40th floor of a glass tower downtown, a place that smelled of success and expensive leather. Jessica herself was exactly as I had imagined, sharp, impeccably dressed, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. She listened to my story without interruption, her face impassive. I laid out my evidence on her vast mahogany desk, the timeline, the bank records, the news article about the fraudulent realtor, and the damning change of address form. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, looking at the mountain of paper. "Eleanor," she said finally, her voice crisp and devoid of pity, which I appreciated, "this is not a family dispute. This is one of the cleanest, most well-documented cases of long-term financial elder abuse I have ever seen. The paper trail is a prosecutor's dream." She leaned forward. "A civil suit would be easy. We'd win, and he'd be ordered to pay you back over time. But for a crime of this duration and magnitude, that feels insufficient. The state's district attorney has a new elder justice unit. They would be very, very interested in this. Are you prepared for that? It means criminal charges. Was I prepared to potentially send my own son to prison? I looked at the check copies spread across her desk, at 20 years of my life condensed into a box of evidence. The son I loved, the boy who scraped his knee and loved my bedtime stories, had vanished long ago. The man who had replaced him was a stranger, a criminal who had preyed on me. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "I am." The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. Jessica handled everything. She compiled the evidence into an airtight case file and presented it to the DA's office. An official investigation was launched. During those next few months, I lived in a state of suspended animation. Daniel still called me every Tuesday. He'd talk about his stressful job, about the market, about his son's soccer practice. He was completely oblivious, living in his world built of my money, never suspecting that the foundation was crumbling beneath his feet. I played my part, the loving, slightly dotty mother, my voice a perfect performance of warmth, while my heart was a frozen stone. The end came on a Wednesday. Jessica called me. "It's done," she said. Investigators from the DA's office visited his home this morning. They seized his computers and financial records. He knows. I imagined the scene. The knock on the door of his beautiful suburban house, the shock on his face, the confusion turning to terror as he was served with a warrant. I felt a grim, quiet satisfaction. The show was over. The confrontation I had been waiting for happened not in my living room, but in a sterile, soulless legal conference room for a preliminary deposition. I was there, sitting beside Jessica, looking calm and composed. Daniel was on the other side of the table with his lawyer. He wouldn't look at me. He looked pale, shrunken, his expensive suit now looking like a costume on a terrified child. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, primal fear. Jessica was magnificent. She didn't raise her voice. She simply laid out the facts, one damning document at a time. On May 12, 2005, your company, DP Holdings LLC, was formed. On May 19, 2005, your mother, Eleanor Vance, closed on her home with her mortgage holder listed as North Star Mortgage Services, a company with no legal registration. On June 1, 2005, the first of 240 payments was made. On June 5, 2005, your LLC received its first deposit for the exact same amount. She continued, her voice a relentless, factual drone, dismantling his entire life, purchased by fraudulent purchase. He broke. Faced with the mountain of evidence, with the threat of a 10 to 20-year prison sentence, he folded completely. The resolution was not about emotion, it was about accounting. There was no tearful, kneeling apology. I wouldn't have believed it anyway. The justice was mathematical, cold, and absolute. To avoid a public trial and a long prison sentence, Daniel pled guilty. He agreed to the terms of the settlement Jessica and the DA's office drew up. He was forced to liquidate everything: his stocks, his savings, his business interests. He had to sign over the deed to his own luxurious house, the one I had unknowingly paid for. Every penny he had taken from me over 20 years was to be returned with interest. He lost everything. I'm writing this from my new home. It's a beautiful 5-bedroom house with a garden and a swimming pool. It's his house. My old house is being sold, and the proceeds have gone into a trust for my actual grandchildren. I don't feel triumph, not really, but I don't feel sadness either. I feel balanced. The scales have been righted. The son I loved was a ghost from a long ago past. I couldn't get him back, so I took his house instead. And in the quiet, empty rooms, I have finally found what he stole from me 20 years ago: a sense of peace.